Talking Star Wars presents Talking Avatar.
Hello, Star Wars and Avatar fans.
I'm Connor.
And I'm Alex.
Today we're going to talk about Avatar The Last Airbender.
In our ongoing mini-series, taking a brief break from Star Wars to explore another multimedia franchise we love, Avatar The Last Airbender, and its sequel series, The Legend of Korra. Today, our topic is diving into one of the broader subjects of the setting, one we've also talked about in a Star Wars context, and that is the political structure and forms of government that we see in the world of Avatar The Last Airbender.
And it's a little more complicated than Star Wars politics. Star Wars politics is kind of like this pendulum that's swinging back and forth. It's usually the two-sided conflict where we do have our outside parties, but the giant swing of power goes from republic to empire to republic. Sometimes the republic is the empire, so it's not exactly a swing. But Avatar is a little bit more complicated because there are multiple factions that are all vying for importance around the globe.
So I would say Star Wars has gotten more nuanced with its political depiction, especially more recently. A backslide during the sequel era, where we then destroy the government and we just have a military junta. So there is no government really depicted at all
Mhm.
in episode 7, 8, and 9. But to move on from that, we then have the world of Avatar, where we have several forms of government showing and then their evolution as time goes on, because political systems do not stay static, they change. So when we start, um, originally with Aang and his world, we have really just three nations left. We have a tribal society as depicted by the water tribes, where there is a chieftain, presumably a council that assists the chieftain, and all decisions are then made by the chieftain and the council. So sort of this, the elders of the tribe make a decision. It is a more nuanced depiction in the north, where there's the formal council. In the south, it's Hakoda and whoever he deputizes, because the population of the South Pole has been so decimated.
Yeah, we really don't even see a power structure or anything in the Southern Tribe until we get to Korra's
Yeah,
era because no one's in the Southern Water Tribe.
yeah. It's just family groups that are surviving. The largest concentration is where Katara and Sokka are from, and it's said that there's other scattered tribes throughout the area, but really they're all just sort of fending for themselves in family groups. So it's an entirely familial side. In the North Pole, we'll see more structure. We have, yeah, like I said, the chief and his advisors and his council, but it's still there is a chief. He is in charge and he makes the decisions, particularly in wartime. So that's the Water Tribe.
Very small government.
Yeah, and it's tribal nature. It's direct. There's not the population is not huge, so the chief can have direct relationships and make decisions in council with all the prominent magnates and families. Particularly before, and we see in Yang Chen's day and in Kyoshi's day in the novels during this time, there was still a water tribe chief. It's depicted as one chief. In Yang Chen's day, Kyoshi was both the northern chief and the southern chief. But again, still there's a chief that's going on. The northern tribe has always been a little bit more prominent, it's shown.
Mhm.
But yeah,
Yeah.
he or she, that we actually don't see any female chieftains, make the decisions and in consultation with their elders. So it's a fairly directorial government, not very flexible. There's not really a bureaucracy that we see. There's not really any need for administration. There's a lot of energy just spent on surviving and subsistence. So the most organization we see is about how to teach benders, and we see there's a sister of master and apprentice, like Master Paku. We see there's a vague military structure, but their population is not so large that they really seem to need the trappings of a lot of government, because it's definitely the smallest form of government that we see from a functioning society. We have bureaucracies and officials and all the things from a larger feudal society in both the Fire Nation and the Earth Kingdom.
And not much changes by the time we get to Korra 70 years later, other than we have some infighting, where I would say the Southern Tribe is, has enough agency to be active, and the Northern Water Tribe wants to sort of push their agenda from North to South Pole and open up spiritual barriers between them.
Well, and I think this is a sign of both. There's the positives and the drawbacks of any system of government, and so the drawback of this highly tribal, family-based society is that one Korra has to take sides because her father is chief, and so with her father being embroiled in this conflict and her uncle being on the other side, it brings a lot of these personal, familial feuding like opportunities to the forefront that isn't present in other systems where there's either a hereditary system or there's a structure in place. Instead, this is direct rule with a series of interconnected family relationships, which can ordinarily, I mean, there is not really much infighting between in the water tribes during the Hundred Years' War, and even then, we don't see any infighting between North and South Pole individuals. Between North and South Pole, yes, but at the same time, it also leaves them vulnerable when Unalaq is sufficiently charismatic and arrives in sufficient force. He cows the South Pole, and has enough of a familial relationship that he is able to claim legitimacy.
So very, again, small tribal. Uh, by the time we get to Korra, it almost feels mob-like, where it's just the small family fighting. Uh,
Yeah, and there's
yeah.
no one there. Like Varric is a very powerful businessman. There's not really anyone there who has sufficient authority or power or oversight to like watch what Varric is doing.
hmm
Like in Republic City, as we can see later, when Hiroshi Sato is accused of supporting the Equalists, there are police to show up and inspect his factories. There is a council that can discuss his opinions. There is a press that will report on his activities. When Varric starts getting up to shady stuff on the South Pole, there are no counterweights to him.
hmm
Maybe that's deliberate by his design, but other than if the chief were to come by and ask Varric directly how he's doing, we don't see any Water Tribe officials that are inspecting Varric's factories, that are looking at what he's transporting aboard his ship, and he is able to then use that lack of oversight to try to seize control of future industries, to become a war profiteer, basically, and there's no one who's there to stop him. There is no counterweight. And so it shows that in an industrialized and advancing society, the sort of tribal system of government that the Water Tribe has is sort of straining under the weight of trying to manage their growing population with just a council and a chief.
So then let's transition to a form of government that was erased even before that of the Water Tribe starting to dwindle in power. The air nomads.
So,
I don't think they had a government per se.
well, the air nomads were always low in population.
hmm
The air temples had a head abbot and a head abbess that were in charge of both the male and female parts of the abbey. And then there was again, we see a council of elders
hmm
shown when Aang is first made aware that he's the Avatar, and Gyatso is then instructed to, what he's about to do with Aang. But it again, it's a very informal structure. The population of the air temples is relatively low, and they're not really so much as a government as they are like monasteries.
hmm
They are closed off cloisters where they engage in activities, but they do not really exactly invite commerce or relationships with the rest of the world. They sort of exist as these neutral locations. I'm reminded of like actual Catholic or Buddhist monasteries in, the appropriate period in our history where, while they can be involved in world affairs, they don't really have rulers. We do see that they have traditions of how to manage their populations. We see someone get exiled in one of the Yangchen novels from an air temple permanently by being given an impossible quest. So they have processes by which it's done, but it's always very passive. It's a very collectivist, community based, and it's not familial because they don't really have families in the um, air nation. It's all collective and for the greater good of the society. I mean, I don't really want to call it like it doesn't have the same ideology that communism would have, for example. But I think collectivism is probably the closest. It's
hmm
a collective commune-like society where they all work for the greater good, and that's not perfect. There are shortcomings. I mean, in the Yang Chen novels, we see that there's no concept of like dangerous criminality. So when a guard does a favor for a criminal and it ends up getting him killed, it's not. It's like there's not worldly enough to know that that was a bad idea.
hmm
So yeah, it's just all up to the head abbot, and again, we see their attention gets waning, and it's up to, for example, the abbot of the air temple to personally maintain a relationship with Yang Chen and manage her meddling in his affairs. So, and then by the time they're wiped out, when we get to the new air nation, when Tenzin is in charge, at first he's just a family patriarch. So it's himself and his kids, and that's it. and he has some acolytes but he's sort of, it's almost like pseudo water tribe where there's just the patriarch. They've abandoned this sort of non-familial, we don't raise our own children, we raise them in a crèche kind of thing. So Tenzin has left that tradition by the wayside and starts adapting more of their traditions to meet the modern era. And we see them sort of adopt, again, their population is so low, they're able to sort of get away with just this vague sense of like a organization where there's a leader. Tenzin is sort of the patriarch, and there's a couple other people that are prominent, but we don't even get a formal. We still see that some people are made airbending masters, such as when Jinora gets her tattoos, but we don't see any other formal structure in the air nomad society, and I don't expect we'll actually see one. Um, Maybe Boomy might introduce something. He was a former military man, and if their population continues to grow, as we see in the Water Tribe, you're going to need to have a way to manage that population. But right now, I mean, they're measured in the hundreds of people, not the thousands.
They'll certainly have a culture by the time we get to a sequel to Korra or any story that's placed later in that future. But you bring up a good point in this kind of collectivism, uh, where we have the water tribes, we have a chieftain, we have an elder who is chosen in order to make the decisions. In the air tribe, it's the elders who have just gained the most experience. So the oldest, the wisest, are a part of this uh, 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 council of decision makers.
Yeah, and we'll see this even when we look at the other nations, that there is definitely a culture of there is a person who is in charge, whether it's hereditary or not. There is a leader, and they, whatever support structure and advisors they have in place, they make decisions, whether that's a king, a fire lord, a chief. So
Not so much the air tribe. It's
yeah, there's an abbot even who makes decisions. So there is a person, and that person is in charge.
Would that be of each temple, or is that in general?
Each temple has their own
Gotcha.
abbot. There's not a head abbot that we're aware of in the Air Nation.
So that's a good distinction. Is that they even by that they don't have that centralized power. By the time we get to the future, it's not, Jinora is looked on with as much experience as and esteem as her father is, just because of her ability.
Yeah, but I mean, let's get into we talk about the Earth Kingdom now, then, because the Earth Kingdom is a relatively realistic depiction of a feudal state in that there is a king, but he is not the only king. So the Earth King is sort of like the emperor or the overking of all these other smaller kings and lords and polities that make up the Earth Kingdom. The Earth Kingdom is massively populous. It is by far the largest nation and has by far the largest population.
Largest land mass.
But
Some Earth pun in there somewhere.
yeah, and Ba Sing Se is the largest metropolis in the world, and even in the time of Korra, that has not changed. Republic City then is the number 2, and probably the Fire Nation capital is 3. Maybe the North Pole is in there somewhere. But yeah, we see that there's a king of Omashu. And is the king of Omashu technically under the authority of the Earth King? Probably. But this is it's this complicated series of feudal relationships that define it. And how much authority does the Earth King have over Omashu? Or does Omashu pay taxes to the Ba Sing Se? Or do they just need to levy troops upon demand? I mean, it's a very feudal structure. The exact dues that the king of Omashu owe to the Earth King are amorphous. We even see the same going where Zaofu in Korra is its own little city-state of metal benders, exists during the time of the Earth Queen, who is sort of a megalomaniac, but she doesn't question that. Does Zaofu pay taxes? Probably. So
It's certainly by the time of Kuvira, they're seen as children of the Earth Nation. They are under Earth Nation control.
well, and Kuvira is trying to impose the idea, and she's taken this from the Fire Nation, of a modern nation state where you have a single national identity imposed over an entire homogenous or even heterogeneous population. That's a relatively actually modern socio-political or political and personal identity. The example you always use is medieval Italy in the modern world. People did not think of themselves as Italian; they thought of themselves as Roman, as Venetian, as from Florence, as Neapolitan from Naples, and even in places like France, they did not see themselves as French for most of the time. It would be we are Burgundian, we are Norman, we are Parisian. So the idea that everyone in a single country should identify with that country dates to like the 17 or 1800s at the earliest in the modern world. Your local allegiances were far more important for most of human history, and I think the Avatar world is showing that in the Earth Kingdom. A citizen of Omashu thinks of themselves as a citizen of Omashu first and a Earth Kingdom citizen second. A citizen of Ba Sing Se thinks themselves as Ba Sing Se first, Earth Kingdom second.
So where do we get to this point where the Earth Kingdom has so much development where the Fire Nation has to fight for that and go through that through conquest? Is it just because they have a large centralized landmass? Is it because of the nature of earthbending in general? Where do we get to such a point where a nation can expand and develop to such a point where it's
where they can have a nation state?
Yeah.
So part of that is technology. You have to have mass communication ability to really maintain a specific identity. You even see this in the United States in the modern era, where state identity was much more important, though less important than like country identity in Europe. But then overall American identity became more important than individual state identity, particularly as time went on. And really, the advent of things that make the world smaller helps. Air in Avatar, it's airships, telegraph lines, radio, all these things that can make the world seem smaller. And so is in the backstory of the Fire Nation. We'll go back to Earth Kingdom in a second, but they are probably the only area that is an actual modern style nation state. There is a monarch. They are the leader. They make decisions. They have a war council. Everyone identifies as from the Fire Nation first. We don't even hear about any local loyalties that they have. In the time of Kyoshi and Yangchen, that's new. The Fire Nation was racked by civil wars before an avatar named Zato, a Fire Nation avatar, took command and unified the Fire Nation to prevent this civil war and joined the Fire Nation administration. And by the time he died, the Fire Nation was a much more unified place. But even in Kyoshi's day, we have breakaway regions, we have rebellions. So it is really the Industrial Revolution under Sozin, where you can send a steamship from one end of the Fire Nation to the other in like less than a week. Or in a week, where communication times and messenger hawks make the world smaller, that really you could have a modern nation state. And of course, he accomplishes part of this with a wartime economy based on conquest. You get a bunch of enemies over there thinking of those as the other, and it's much better to think of yourself as a Fire Nation citizen and not one of those dangerous air nomad aggressors or fire or water tribe terrorists or Earth Kingdom enemies. Instead, we owe allegiance to the Fire Lord. We say our pledge to the Fire Lord every morning before school. We put portraits of himself up in our house. It's very North Korea, Maoist China, deliberately calling back to all of those fascist dictatorial regimes. But at the same time, it's almost like the transition of Soviet Russia from an agrarian, decentralized state into a centralized one. It had consequences. It involved external wars, but it happened. So, but then you end up with pictures of Stalin everywhere, and people get disappeared. So, all that to say, you get a modern nation state in several different ways, but one of the ways that's pretty much required is an advanced communication technology.
And it seems like with the Earth Nation, they can profit and plunder from their surroundings so well. They can create cities. They can create the means of transportation from one corner of the nation to the next.
The Earth Kingdom sprawls, and travel is difficult. Like we see, even with a flying bison, our team of heroes has trouble navigating the Earth Kingdom.
Takes days, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, where do we land? Where's safe? It's the battle lines are not well drawn with the Fire Nation. It's such a disparate, patchy nation. And we see that this was true in the days of other avatars too. We had Chin the Conqueror, who attempted to unify the Earth Kingdom again, much like Kuvira did, only to fail when he hit the immovable object that was Kyoshi. Before that, we had the Yellowneck Rebellion, that for people who wore these yellow scarves from the northern part of the Earth Kingdom tried to break away. And then we had Gravedigger Zhan Zhu kill hundreds of them to put down the rebellion in the name of the Avatar, which was a great thing. Read the Kyoshi novels, everyone.
But it puts into mind the second season of Avatar 2, where you have these metropolitan areas And then in between, it's almost like the Wild West, where anything could happen, where you could run into bandits, or you could run into the invading forces of the Fire Nation, or bounty hunters. It's this area that is so large it is not so well policed in the corners between cities.
Yeah, we even see there's these separate tribes from the episode of the Divide. We have the Ganjins and their rivals from different tribes, even though they're all from the Earth Kingdom. They have different traditions and they hate each other. There's feuds, so definitely a feudal state in the Earth Kingdom. And we don't even see the Earth King having a presence outside of Ba Sing Se, other than there was an army detachment that captures Iroh in season 1, but that's really the only projection of Earth Kingdom strength that we see. We have some local military toughs who force Zuko into firebending and revealing himself in Zuko alone. But before that, its control is very localized. The central government is frankly very weak. There is not a strong central government. Omashu is well run and would have put up a fight against the Fire Nation had Bumi not surrendered.
And when we fast forward 70 years and we take a look at what happens to the Earth Kingdom, we have a new air nomad society that's building. We have water tribes that are developing and have infighting. With the Earth Nation, it's been stagnant for 70 years. We have a queen whose control is starting to slip, and it's just a pattern of losing control ever since Azula was able to infiltrate and take control.
Yeah, and we see the effects of having survived 100 years of war. The political structure of the Earth Kingdom is fragile. It's again, any monarchical society is vulnerable to the quality of your monarch. And so when we had a good monarch, the Earth King, who then grew and is able to make pacts with Zuko, hey, things went well. The Earth King was forced. But then his daughter takes the throne, and she sends things into a tailspin to stagnation for 50 years. And we have Zhao Fu breaks away. There is a treaty signed to have this neutral area in the former Fire Nation colonies, where there's now this mix of ideologies. We have both the Earth Kingdom in the comics, The Promise and The Search. We have the Earth Kingdom and the Fire Nation having to grapple with citizens who no longer see themselves as strictly Fire Nation or Earth Kingdom, but something in between. We have intermarriage between the two peoples. We have an Earthbender who identifies as a Fire Nation citizen attempt to kill Zuko. So the whole thing, it's much messier than Roku knows how to deal with when Aang tries to talk to him. And Roku's option of turning back the clock doesn't work. So it requires the establishment of the eventual United Republic of the former occupied territories. And frankly, that shows just how weak the central government of the Earth Kingdom is, in that a whole region can just break away, and there's not really anything lost from the Earth Kingdom. That area would have been under occupation for 100 years, and the citizens no longer identified, and they probably didn't have all that strong allegiance to the Earth King to begin with. So, weakness of a monarchical society, and we see, even in the days of the Earth King and then his daughter, that it's highly ritualized. There's sort of this semi-divine aspect to the Earth King. He's kept separated from his subjects. And we even see in Yang Chen's day, the Earth King is known as a bloodthirsty monster, to the point where the White Lotus attempt to assassinate the Earth King because he's such a bloodthirsty tyrant, and it fails, and he becomes an even more bloodthirsty tyrant. But everyone's at his whim. He's the Earth King. He has absolute power in the Earth Kingdom. And even if his central control is relatively weak, he still has way more resources than a pre-unified Fire Nation has.
But by the time we get to that period of stagnation, that period of weakness where the government does fall, we have, in the time of Avatar, what was called the strongest nation on Earth become now the ultimate foe in our series of Korra.
Yeah, the Earth Empire under Kuvira. And I think this shows, once Zahir did not portray his obviously had an ideology. He's an anarchist, a violent anarchist, as believing that the Earth Queen was corrupt. He was correct. Believe the Earth King should be removed from power. Probably correct. He's like, I will murder the Earth Queen and everything will take care of itself. Well, Zahir, you've skipped a couple of steps there as far as how to reform a society. But our revolutionary commits regicide, kills the Earth Queen, and it just, without her gone, there's a power vacuum. and not even her nephew. What's her heir? That's Franz Maku's friend.
That I don't recall. It's
Prince Wu. So we
uh,
have Prince Wu does not have legitimacy. He has to be propped up by the government of the former colony of the Earth King.
mhm,
The United Republic would have to provide Wu legitimacy
yeah.
to be able to ascend the throne. And even then, no one really wants to listen to him. The government was fragile to begin with, and now it just leaves a power vacuum for a charismatic general to step in. And hey, that has never happened in society before, where
Mhm.
the charismatic general takes over the weakened state. And Cuvier takes this opportunity, as people like Stalin have, to implement a loyal officer corps that will support her and seizes control of the government and copies what she sees in very successfully in the Fire Nation to make a nation state. She
Mhm.
standardizes uniforms. She makes trains to put rapid communication between all parts of her empire. She tries to implement a unified education and identity system. She just also does it with like relocation and concentration camps and exiling political freedoms
Mhm.
and making everyone loyalty to her because she's a fascist dictator.
And new and scarier forms of technology, as seen in our previous episode on the giant mech.
But yeah, I mean, her railway system is entirely reminds me of the
Mhm.
Trans-Siberian Railway that Soviet Russia built to try to then transform early 1900s Russia into a modern nation state.
Mhm.
So very, very similar. Yeah, and we see the monarchical system where all power is concentrated in one bad monarch who's vulnerable to a takeover by a
Mhm.
charismatic military general.
And now we have to see in the future where the pieces will be picked up. And once this nationalist leader falls, what then happens to this large Earth kingdom? Is it broken up into separate
Yeah,
nations?
is there then the city state of Zaofu or the kingdom of Zaofu? Is there the Republic of Republic City?
Mhm.
Is there the greater kingdom of Ba Sing Se? But Wu refuses. He wants to hold elections.
Mhm.
He's like, I've been united. I don't like Raiko, but he's better than my dead um,
That's
aunt was.
yeah.
And yeah, so
That's by the time we get to a future Avatar series, that's going to be the most interesting because we will have an Earthborn Avatar and the nation, world, republic, wherever they come from, is going to definitely stare. It's definitely going to shape their personality and upbringing.
yeah, and that takes us. I think we see the Earth Kingdom. It takes us to the Fire Nation.
Yeah.
We've touched on that a little bit. We're touched on that a little bit, where they're relatively new. They're one of the only unified nation
Mhm.
states where they have a national identity. Part of this is wartime effects, but again, we don't see any local loyalties in the same way we do in the Earth Kingdom.
Mhm.
Zuko is the Fire Prince, and every member of the Fire Nation recognizes him. Like in the Earth Kingdom, people don't even recognize the Earth King.
Mhm.
Everyone recognizes the Fire Prince
Mhm.
and the Fire Lord. So there's this cult of personality. There is this almost reverence, but the Fire Lord is also not expected to be as inaccessible as the Earth King.
Mhm.
He's supposed to make real decisions. He has a high council. It's highly ritualized and formal how you interact with the Fire Lord, but he's there as a presence, as an active force.
He's the
Not
direct monarch.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's not a figurehead.
Mhm.
He makes direct decisions. The Fire Nation is smaller than the Earth Kingdom, so still able to that. But we see, and we'll talk to this a little bit in the Earth Kingdom. We saw bureaucracy. We have the Dai Li. We have ministries. We have universities. We
Mhm.
have officials. We have officers. So you have all that in the Earth Kingdom. You have all that in the Fire Nation too. We have ministers in their
Mhm.
fancy hats. We have people with abacuses taking down records. We have warehouses and storehouses and
I was just going to talk
communication
about the
lines.
priests with the fancy hats who take care of the
Solstice
Well, that's the
temple.
Fire Sages. They're
Mhm.
a religious order, but I'm talking about, yeah, you have a local mayor who then calls in the bounty hunter to hunt down the Toph when she's being the runaway.
Mhm.
So we have a relatively ordered society. Or it almost reminds me of feudal Japan or
Mhm.
England with its uh, medieval England with its high value on social rigidity and hierarchy, but and low tolerance for crime.
And it's been running that way for 100 years at the point of Avatar: The Last
Well,
Airbender.
and it helps to have the
Mhm.
plundered wealth of other nations to prop
Oh
up your
yeah.
government. Imperialism pays.
Mhm.
And so they are able to, I think, keep their citizens relatively happy and
Mhm.
insulated. The war is fought on another continent. I mean, honestly, it's why the United States in the modern era is able to fight wars on other nations is because it's not fought on their own country. We only see one attack on the actual Fire Nation. It takes place in their capital, and it is repulsed. So most of the fighting takes place in the land of the Earth Kingdom or at the water, the North or South Pole.
And we just so happen to have like the cleanest transition in power from Ozai to his son Zuko, who is able to maneuver this great machine that has benefited off of the backs of thousands of countless, dead soldiers and victims, and able to turn it into a society that's able to stand, toe to toe with the New Republic and just develop alongside with them.
Well, no one criticizes the actual political system of the Fire Nation. Oh, there's a Fire Lord. And again, I think whether that's valid or not, we'll see. But they're all focused on the quality of the Fire Lord. Zuko will make a good Fire Lord. But what happens when we get another bad Fire Lord?
Right.
What are the checks and balances here? Like, bad Earth King, okay, he's weak, but all the Earth Kingdom can mostly handle itself unless we're being invaded by the Fire Nation. Well, then the system fell apart. The Earth Kingdom can kind of putter along unless a charismatic military general were to that's bad. So
and the Earth Kingdom itself is diverse enough so that it can break apart into separate territories with their own identity. With the Fire Nation, you can't. There is no separate aspect of the Fire Nation that stands out. It's just its individual towns.
But no one in the Fire Nation wants to destroy the Fire Nation. Like, people in the Earth Kingdom are like, I want to slice off a piece. We get lots of people that want to have their own regions. Zhao Fu, Kuvira doesn't want those places to be gone. But we see Omashu can be its own thing. But even when there are like 3 or 4 plots I can think of in the comics and books where people want to topple Zuko, they want to put another Fire Lord in his place. They don't want to like, oh, let's break off these 4 islands into our own little mini state. They're like, no, we want the whole thing. It's like Rome. It's like, no, we don't want a piece of Rome. We want to declare someone else Fire Lord and have them rule.
So by the time we get to a future series, the Earth Kingdom might develop into some sort of a nation or
Federalist Republic, maybe.
Just something that has elected leaders of separate states. But if the Fire Kingdom remains, it could still be like Britain, where it does have a monarchy. It still has this ruling family, but maybe they don't have the same authority, because we can't just have another bad Fire Lord be the villain of the next series.
Yeah, the Fire Nation does not have a great presence in Legend of Korra. We see Izumi, who is Fire Lord Zuko's granddaughter and Fire Lord, or daughter, one of the two. So we see his successor running things, and apparently competently, but they don't intervene in world affairs. They don't send anyone to stop Unalaq. They do not interfere in the affairs of Republic City. They view the rise of the Earth Empire as an Earth Kingdom affair. They have grown fairly isolationist.
The incumbent king is a general in the army, so
we'll get to General Iroh of the United Forces in a minute, and his relationship with the United Forces, which I think is an important part. So we talked about all these existing nations. There's a couple of the little micro states we should talk about. We have like the Sandbenders appear to have a kind of a tribal society. There's the Foggy Swamp. We don't really see much of a hierarchy there.
Both of which in the Earth Kingdom, which again is so
disparate. I can't really think of any other like separate societies or countries. The Kyoshi novels show us a few more regions of the Earth Kingdom that have their own traditions. That's a very common thing. They own nominal loyalty to the Earth Kingdom, and it makes it a point in the Kyoshi novels about how hard it is to keep control of the Earth Kingdom with all these powerful regional magnates.
We have a untouched Aztec-like society in the Fire Nation.
Yeah, there's like 100 guys, and they have a chief. So,
and where they keep populating, we will never know. I guess we never see the lives of the tribe.
There's women in there too.
I guess I didn't know.
There's like 2 people speaking parts. They're both men, but there are women present in that scene.
Sure.
So apparently the sun embraces all gender representation. But not really. We don't really see any like. So we talked about so let's go to Korra's time, I think, and let's look at. We talked about sort of every other nation, but let's look at the United Republic, Republic City. So it is the former Fire Nation colonies. There is a big metropolis that is its capital, but it also comprises the the land surrounding it as well. And when we see it, it is initially ruled by a council of 5, all of whom are benders and all of whom are representatives of other nations.
Other than the one human representative. Or is it
The
No,
Avatar and the 4 representatives.
no, there's North
There
and
we
South
go.
Pole, and Earth Kingdom, and Fire Nation, and Air Nation, which is Tenzin.
Okay, gotcha.
So that's the compromise, but it seems to be just a simple majority council of 5,
Mm-hmm.
2 of which are from the Water Tribe, because I think they were sort of the balancing force against the diametrically opposed
Mhm.
votes of the Fire Nation and Earth Kingdom early on. And so it sort of exists in this, it's kind of a buffer state between all these nations then, because all the governing entities are from other countries. So it's sort of in this, when we first see it, Republic City is kind of in this liminal space. Tenzin is the only one that is both a full-time resident of Republic City and is primarily invested in the city. Tenzin has no loyalty to the Earth Kingdom, Fire Nation, or any of the Water Tribes. His mother is from the Southern Water Tribe, so if he was going to side with anyone.
Mhm.
But when you make Tarlok your representative there,
Yeah.
then they're opposed.
Mhm.
But yeah, we see it as a simple majority vote, and Tarlok, a charismatic leader, is able to get blackmail and leverage, or just straight up charisma on the other members, and enact pretty brutal policies of repression
Mhm.
with simple majority vote and a oligarchic council, where they just apparently make decisions by fiat and decree. We don't see any council. We have a free press, a somewhat free press, which is part of a more advanced society. But when it first starts, it is still, and that's still the most representative government we see.
Mhm.
Where there's actually 5 people instead of just 1.
right?
But
It's not
it's
your council of elders.
It kind of is. It's that sort of Water Tribe, air nomad way of these are the respected elders who we've appointed to decide for us. So it's still representative in some way.
yeah. So that doesn't survive long. Again, it's not a very flexible form of government. It does not have the bureaucracy and support needed. I mean, we have Lin Beifong, the head of police, who reports to that council. So there's officials and taxes and customs dues and inspections, all of those things that a functioning society is. But their executive power is also the legislative power is in one little council,
Mhm.
and it doesn't work all that well. Even calling in the Republic forces to fight Amon, um, Councilman Tenzin has the ability to do it, but only after all the other councilman people have been either moved out of the picture, and it's at the discretion of a general to do so.
Mhm.
So then we get into one of the more controversial figures of Korra, which is President Raiko, the first elected president of Republic City. And I think Raiko is actually a fascinating figure to me because our protagonists largely dislike him, and he makes a variety of decisions that are disliked by a lot of the cast. However, he's the first democratically elected leader that we see, and he's at the whims of voters. He's trying to do his best for his city, and he might have. I think he is a president in a world that is used to autocratic rulers. He was not an autocrat, so he appears kind of wishy-washy and indecisive to a world used to like, all right, I will now ship off 10,000 soldiers to help you. Raiko can't do that. He's a president. He is not a fire lord.
Mhm.
So I don't think Raiko was a particularly good president, but he is a president. And so the way in which I think he gets a bad rap because he is interacting with people who are used to people being able to decide things by fiat. And we've just tried to make a more representative form of government, and it's succeeded. And that's going to come with it. It's more bureaucracy. Things turn more slowly. He can't make as many decisions right away. He's going to be more cautious and risk averse than an autocrat will be. And he's very concerned, as he should be, when General Iroh starts plotting with Korra behind his back to do some maneuvers of his forces out near Southern Water Tribe waters. When your general starts plotting behind your president's back in a republic, the next step is you're getting overthrown by that general. Now, would Iroh do that? No, but I can totally see why Reiko shot that idea down.
Right. That's when it's time to take decisive moves.
And it's an interesting discussion of where the authority is, because we're coming from this attitude of, oh, the Avatar is the ultimate authority. We could have different nations, but they all look to the Avatar. When we have this, you know, instead of having the world looking to this child in awe and just wondering what the solution is going to be, we have everyone looking at this teenager and saying, you don't know better. You're not in my position. You don't know what's necessary in order to make the right decision. So we have this struggle with everyone looking at the Avatar saying they should figure out what should be happening, but not knowing because they're just a teenager. And then everyone wanting the president to make decisive action, but he can't because he is a non-bending representative of them, and really one of three non-benders of any consequence, along with Sokka and Asami.
Yeah, I mean, there's others. Ty Lee comes to mind,
Mhm.
but
But
yeah,
even
so
she has a magic ability herself.
yeah, so that's Raiko. But I mean, as we see, there's the thing in a democracy: you don't like the president, you vote for a new one. When elections are held, he
Mhm.
loses. Julie actually becomes the next president of Republic City, with Varric running her campaign and not stepping anywhere near the actual politics himself because he knows he would never get elected because he's an unpopular war criminal. But
He'll just satisfy or be satisfied with first gentleman of state.
yeah, so we see an election held and with a campaign and stances and positions, and Raiko is removed from office. And peacefully. I mean, he's not happy about it, and there's some controversy, but it's the first peaceful transition of power we've seen probably since Zuko abdicated the throne off screen to his
Right.
daughter or granddaughter. So,
So I think moving forward, we can take a look at Republic City almost as the first step of where nations are going to go. The water tribes are going to have to either maintain their bilateral decision making, where they're these two separated states, or they'll have to come up with some way to choose a representative from one side or the other. That's
or
where the
they
Earth
at least need a a
Mhm.
more decisive government. I mean, we know that there's magistrates because I mean,
Mhm.
Korra threatens a magistrate, but again, she threatens a magistrate on behalf of a family member. So the whole tribal blood relation part
Mhm.
of the Water Tribe is breaking down. The
Yeah.
weak central control in the Earth Kingdom is breaking down. The Fire Nation has survived by going very insular and isolationist.
Mhm.
The United Republic is on the cutting edge, but is unstable.
I think that's where a lot of it's going to go because you have the Republic City, the new air nomad state, is just another arm of Republic City. It has the connective tissues with Tenzin, and most of the people from the new air nomads are of Republic City and are, they weren't denominated as benders before that. Uh, so we have just a world where things are kind of cracking and crumbling. So they'll have to either look towards the Fire Nation or Republic City to survive. So something between the autocratic decision making of a monarchical family or a true representative government. So maybe this will be some of the I don't know arena that the next Avatar series will look at. I know The Crown was a public show, or that The Crown was a popular show on Netflix, so maybe there'll be something to do with uh, state-controlled power versus the more royal-controlled power. Who knows?
Yeah, in the future, I see the Air Nation becoming more of a thing, but being relatively not prominent on the world stage. The Water Tribes having to evolve. The Earth Kingdom crumbling into pieces. Still maybe nominally being the Earth King, but really just having this federalist autonomous areas.
Mhm.
But that'll depend what's the next big threat that's going to arise and what's the next big challenge the world will have to face will determine how its societies formulate and change.
Maybe instead of I know last episode I talked about spirit email. Maybe the air tribe, the air nation, will invent such a fast way of travel or communication that they will become the next superpower. They'll become like IT tech, like uh, billionaires.
Yeah, I don't see that happening yet, Connor.
We'll figure it out. We'll get there. Otherwise, any other thoughts on politics in the world of Avatar?
I think that's everything on the world of politics. If you have any thoughts on this, please do feel free to discuss this on our subreddit at www.reddit.com/r/talking Star Wars. It's also the place for talking Avatar. Or leave a comment anywhere you see this episode. Thank you for listening, and join us next time for our continued mini series on Avatar: The Last Airbender.